Allen Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Scott Thompson.
Broker fraud is running rampant in trucking, and it's creating all sorts of problems for owner-operators. The latest on that and more on today's show with Tom Crowley and Christopher Snyder of OOIDA's Business Services Department. Then you probably know about OOIDA's ongoing mission to fight for the rights of all truckers. It's at the center of all the association does, and it also just so happens to be what the November issue of Landline magazine is all about. We sit down with the editors to discuss why the OOIDA mission statement is more important than ever amid new developments with autonomous trucks, speed limiters, and driver pay. And then at the tail end of our show today, we'll get our weekly spot market update. DAT says capacity is shrinking at a rapid pace right now. We break down what that means for those of you who depend on the spot market. All of that and more coming up. But first, the news with Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Scott. The lane for driverless trucks has been opened between Dallas and Houston. The self-driving truck company Aurora announced that the lane is ready for its planned driverless truck launch in late 2024. A new terminal in Houston has also opened, and like the one in Dallas that opened earlier this year, it's designed to support and service driverless trucks at a commercial scale. Sterling Anderson is co-founder and chief product officer at Aurora. He says this corridor's launch is happening a year ahead of the planned commercial driverless launch between Dallas and Houston, which will enable the company to focus next year on integrating its autonomous trucks into customer operations. This weekend will mark the end of daylight saving time. Texas DOT is already urging drivers to be cautious while out on the roads, as it will start to get dark a lot earlier. There's been some talk over the past couple of years of ending the time change. USA Today reports that the Sunshine Protection Act, which would make daylight saving time permanent, started to pick up speed last year. It was passed unanimously by the Senate in 2022, but it didn't pass the U.S. House of Representatives and was not signed into law by President Joe Biden. A 2023 version of the act has remained idle in Congress. The opponents to year-round daylight saving time include medical and educational professional organizations, citing health and safety concerns. So this Sunday morning, it'll be time to fall back. The first Arctic blast of the season has hit the U.S., plunging temps below freezing for a lot of people, which means it's a good time to remind you about chain laws. They vary by state, by conditions, and sometimes even by certain highways. To get the lowdown on the laws in your state or the states you pass through, head to landline.media and click on the Resources tab at the top of the page. That's where you'll find two separate chain law roundups for 2023, one for the United States and another for Canada. If you prefer a printed copy, something you can keep in the cab, the full rundown can be found in the October issue of Landline magazine. The list is checked each year to ensure accuracy, and although the information has been updated, it's still a good idea to check with the state's Department of Transportation, since officials tend to make decisions on the fly when conditions get really bad. Some states may require chains on certain highways under certain conditions, so always check your state's 511 system before driving in winter weather. And if you needed further proof that winter is coming, the annual Name a Snowplow contests are beginning. North Dakota's is among the first for the season. The DOT there is inviting North Dakotans to submit name ideas for a snowplow in their home district. Some of last year's winning names included Plowabunga, Control Salt Delete, and Sleetwood Mac. This year's contest is open until November 20th. For more information, you can head to dot.nd.gov. Plans are now in place for a bridge in Georgia to be raised. WTOC reports that Georgia's Department of Transportation plans to raise the Talmadge Bridge by 20 feet starting in early of 2025. GDOT says this will help with growth at the nearby port of Savannah. Right now, the bridge has 185 feet of clearance. Kyle Collins with GDOT says raising the bridge will allow for bigger cargo ships to pass below.
Being able to support them to bring that additional commerce is not only going to help the area and the region, but really the country as a whole.
Collins says as for delays for those traveling across the bridge, he doesn't expect there to be many.
You would have some temporary closures. We're not going to have any detours of this bridge that's in the plans, but as probably not going to be anything that drivers really notice other than maybe just, from 2 lanes down to 1.
According to the article, the Georgia Ports Authority has called for the bridge raising project in recent months. A bill that would allow heavier trucks to haul on more routes in Michigan and Wisconsin has been introduced in the Senate in Wisconsin. Right now, DOT can issue an annual or consecutive month permit for an oversized or overweight vehicle to transport loads within 11 miles of the Wisconsin-Michigan state line and on specifically designated highways. This bill would add more highway segments to the permit. According to an NPR article, the request for this comes from timber groups. Supporters say additional segments would save time and money, but some worry the additional weight could further damage the state's roads. A stretch of Interstate 84 through southwestern Idaho is getting wider. The Idaho Department of Transportation has broken ground on its I-85 expansion project in Caldwell. A lane will be added in each direction to a 2-mile span of the freeway between Centennial Way and Franklin Road. Crews will also reconstruct an interchange there and make other improvements. Construction begins this month and will take place in several phases until its expected completion during the summer of 2027. Until then, expect lane closures overnight and slower going during the daytime. Iowa has rolled out its mobile ID across the state. The Iowa Department of Transportation announced this week that Iowa Mobile ID is available in the Apple Store and Google Play. The app allows residents to keep a digital version of their Iowa-issued driver's license or ID on their smartphone. According to a press release, the Iowa Mobile ID is a companion to the physical card and does not replace it. Iowans should still carry their physical card. Governor Kim Reynolds says Iowa is the first state in the nation to roll out a mobile ID, with a large number of businesses across the state capable of accepting the ID. For more information, you can visit iowadot.gov/mobile ID. Communities in Wisconsin will soon be getting some road safety upgrades. Nearly $1 million has been announced in federal discretionary funds through the U.S. Department of Transportation's Safe Streets and Roads for All program. The grant program is aimed at helping communities identify solutions to improve road safety. 5 communities will receive funding for projects that include portable speed bumps and high-visibility crosswalks, as well as funding for studies that will help identify future projects. And finally, firefighters in New York were called to a potential house fire on Halloween night, only to find it was just an impressive display. UPI reports that crews responded to a home for what was believed to be a confirmed structure fire, only to find flames were actually an amazing Halloween decoration. The department said no action was taken against the homeowner. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. We're just a few days away from our annual Truckers for Troops telethon, and unlike in past years, we're going for 2 whole weeks this time, not just 1. The annual fundraising drive focuses on supporting U.S. troops overseas and veterans back home. Since 2007, OOIDA has raised more than $750,000, sent more than 3,200 care packages overseas and aid packages to 65 different facilities that care for wounded, disabled, and homeless veterans, including the Veterans Community Project. The 2-week campaign period begins on Monday. You can take part by calling into OOIDA headquarters during business hours. You can also go online 24 hours a day and donate. That's at OOIDA.com. And all next week, we'll have exclusive stories right here on Landline Now, dedicated to our troops and our veterans, as we shine a much-deserved spotlight on all the sacrifices that have and continue to be made. Coming up next, we're going to take another run at the broker fraud issue. It's still a problem, and it's taking a toll on the owner-operators out there who depend on a solid broker network to make a living. We'll get into the problems being caused by unscrupulous brokers and what you can do to protect yourself. Stick around. Landline Now is back right after this.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine ViberTech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with ViberTech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. more miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Landline Now, welcome back. Broker fraud is running rampant in trucking, and it's causing all kinds of problems for owner-operators who work with those companies. Here with the latest on that and more are Tom Crowley and Christopher Snyder of OOIDA's Business Services Department. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Good to be here.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Let's start with this broker fraud thing. And one of the things right now, Tom, is brokers setting up legit companies and never paying, which to me makes me question the whole legit company thing. Walk us through, if you would, what you're hearing from people about what's happening here.
Yeah, Mark. I mean, a lot of the fraud that's going on in the industry out there is it's not new, but it's really ramped up this last year. I mean, it's just to all-time highs. Broker fraud, so a new entity will set up as a brokerage. They'll get a bond in place. They'll apply for their authority, and they will be set up as and I use these little air quotes, quote unquote, legit company. But are they legit when they don't pay and when they do a lot of double brokering and scams and they pull loads? They either team up with a so-called legit carrier, or they just pull the fraud off themselves, where they'll go on the load boards, they'll pull loads off there as if they're the carrier, that they're going to haul the load, and then they turn right around and tender it out for brokerage to somebody else. A lot of the times, especially with the low rates that are out there, they'll jack the rates up. They'll make it look like a better load than what it was, and somebody will come along and grab onto that load and think, man, this is going to make my money right. All right, finally, I got a good load, only to not get paid at all. So there's just so much going on out there that carriers, they've got to be aware. They've got to know how to vet these brokers. Just like brokers vet carriers, carriers need to vet the brokers too.
So walk us through that a little bit. I mean, how do you tell good from the bad? How do you vet these brokers?
Well, when you go on a load board and you find a load that you are interested in, now granted, you don't have a lot of time because everything's competition. There's somebody else looking at those loads too. But, you've got to go through, and if it's not a broker that you've worked with before, then you've got to look at their information. You've got to look at their phone number, their email address. You've got to start looking for ways. You have to look at the information and see if you can verify it. Now, you can do some of this by going to the FMCSA's website, pulling up the broker information and looking at the address that's listed there, the phone numbers that are listed there. And if you can't determine if they're legit or not, call the phone number that's listed on the Fed's website. If it goes back to that same brokerage, and then you can say, hey, let me talk to this broker, and you can go that way, kind of backwards into it, so that you can independently verify that they are who they say they are. I mean, because even some of your bigger brokerage firms out there are getting, they're getting spoofed. They're getting people who are coming by and making up the information to make it look like they are some of these bigger firms. One of them that I'll say is really getting hammered with the double broker scams is like Amazon loads. People go out there and pull Amazon loads. Well, if you pull them from Amazon, that's one thing. But if you're pulling them off the load boards and it's an Amazon load from PDQ brokerage, well, that's an issue right there, because Amazon loads, they don't double broker them out, or they don't co-broker them out. Let me say, because that whole co-brokering is another issue, but they don't do that. So. And if you haul the load and it's an Amazon load, but you hauled it for a different brokerage and you haul it, you don't really have any recourse, because, you can't get a hold of Amazon. They don't answer their phone just to call them up and say, hey, I got one of your loads. It was double brokered and I didn't get paid. What do I do? Amazon's not going to deal with you. There's no way to get a hold of Amazon. That's an issue. So it's just rampant. I mean, there are so many different scams. I mean, we could sit here and waste hours just talking about each individual scam. And as we do that, there's more coming along every day.
You mentioned, of course, looking them up on the FMCSA's website and things like that. Are credit checks useful here?
They're not as useful as you'd think. I mean, a lot of folks factor their freight. So they go to their factor and they pull a credit check on some of these brokers. And they'll show that, they pay their bills. They've got so many days to pay and so on and so forth. And it all looks legit, except for you're not dealing with that actual broker. You're dealing with a scam who has put on a front to be that broker, try to appear to be that broker, but they're not. And they're probably not even based in this country. Some of these scams that are going on come from overseas. How do you deal with that? How do you collect when you've been taken advantage of there? I mean, you go to the Attorney General or to the
Inspector General?
Inspector General, thank you. You go and make a complaint. You go to the FMCSA. You go to the NCCDB. You make a complaint there. You can make a complaint all these places, but there's nothing happens. There's how do they go back when the people that are perpetrating these frauds come from overseas? I mean, there's just nothing out there that is going to make it okay. There's nothing out there that's going to say, all right, we'll get you your money. There's just no way to go about it. An actual broker, a legit broker, will have a bond. And if they don't pay you, you can go back against their bond. But these fraud brokers, I mean, that's where you got to check and make sure there's a bond in place. That's one of the things that I mentioned when checking the FMCSA's website is check to make sure they've got a bond. Because there just is no protection for the small carrier out there. It's buyer beware. It's operate at your own risk.
Well, even with the bond, you've got the whole problem of who else is making a claim on that bond.
Yes, some of these fraudulent brokers that we've seen out there that do have a bond in place, but they'll have $1.5 million worth of freight rolling down the road or worth of haul rates going down the road for a $75,000 bond. So you take that and you divide that out between all the carriers that got ripped off, and you end up with pennies on the dollar, maybe. And that's months later before you even get that.
Okay. Beyond the scams and schemes, we have an ongoing problem with broker-carrier contracts. And you've talked a little bit about this before, some of the difficulties that people are running into there. Once again, can you kind of draw out the problem, explain the problem that we're dealing with?
Well, the problem is, number one, that small carriers, they sign these contracts without reading them and understanding them, or understanding them if they do read them, is that these contracts are what dictates their relationship with this broker. Well, there are these broker-carrier contracts written by the brokers. They don't want to negotiate with the carrier on these. They just want to say, here's our contract, take it or leave it. There are situations there where people call up and say, what rights do I have? Well, you don't really have any rights other than what's written in the contract. There's nothing there that says everything must be fair and balanced. Although you would hope it would be, you would think it would be. It's not. These contracts are written very heavy-handedly and slanted in the broker's favor. It'll be a situation where you're hauling a load that is a $100,000 load. You're liable for that load while it's on your truck. You're hoping to make a couple of $1,000s off that load if all goes well. But there's no guarantees there. As before the show, we were talking about a situation where I had a guy that showed up at a receiver 10 a.m. this morning, looking to get his load pulled off. He shows up there. The receiver says, no, that's not the way we work. You got to drop your trailer. It'll take us 2 to 7 days to get it unloaded, and then you come back and pick it up. Show me a small carrier, 1 or 2 truck operation that can be hung up for that long, 2 to 7 days, waiting on their trailer to be unloaded. So they call me up and they say, well, what are my rights? All I could say is, well, what's your contract say? He said, well, I don't know. I'll have to find it. Well, let's find it. Let's discuss what's in there, because there's nothing in there. I can almost guarantee you there's nothing in there that's going to cover you on this. It's going to be a negotiation. You're going to have to negotiate a rate for what it's going to cost for your trailer to sit there 2 to 7 days. Now, in the meanwhile, you've already got other freight booked. That's of no consequence. You've got, places you got to get. Maybe you've got a driver that you told you'd have home or whatever. These brokers, none of that matters to them. The only thing that is their concern is that load that's on your truck right now. And you're in a real compromised position to negotiate any kind of an out here. As I told this individual this morning, I said, your options are really narrow. I mean, you can tell the broker, no, I can't do this. I tendered for delivery. My contract says 10 a.m. And, if we can't do that, then I'm going to look for storage, put this stuff into storage, and we'll deal with it there. And I told the carrier, the problem is you will probably be in court. You will probably have to go to court because nothing in that contract gives you that option. So small carriers really need to read these contracts. They need to know what's in them, know what their obligations are. There's nothing in these contracts that allow for a truck to break down, for a driver to be sick, for any number of things. There's nothing in these contracts that allow for that. If any of that happens and you're late, you are in breach, and they will fine you. They will, as we've seen, all kinds of stuff. I mean, they'll fine you for being late. They'll fine you for being early. They come up with all reasons to fine you. But you want to go back on the broker and say, well, hey, I want to fine you for screwing up my delivery appointment. There's no option in that contract for that. It's just very one-sided, and small carriers need to be aware of what they're up against.
Well, I'm curious because we talk sometimes about, like when we talked about leasing on with a carrier, that you can make notes in that contract, you can scratch out sections and initial it, and it's a negotiation with that carrier. Is there a capability here to negotiate with these brokers and to try and alter the contract?
Well, as with any contract, it can be negotiated and altered and made to fit both parties if both parties agree. The problem is these brokers, they're not going to if they send you a contract and you look through it and you make notes and you cross some stuff out and say, no, I don't agree to this and that and the other. The brokers could say, okay, and they could initial that, and that could become the way the contract is. But they don't do that. They say, no, here's our contract. It's a take it or leave it. It's non-negotiable. So many times the small carriers, they just don't realize the verbiage, the way this stuff works out, how it's stacked against them. They don't realize this until the crap hits the fan, and they're calling up saying, hey, this is how this is. What are my options here? And that's when it comes back to, like I mentioned earlier, you don't really have any options. Your options are what's in that contract, and that contract is written in favor of the broker and the broker's customer.
It sounds like to a great extent, whatever you've got to do has got to happen before you ever sign on to carry that load. You've got to find a legitimate broker whose contract doesn't include some of this crap.
Yeah, that's the thing. You do need to find brokers that are fair, balanced, that are looking for everybody to be profitable rather than just themselves. So much of this too, it comes back where carriers call them, they say, yeah, the broker took 50% off this load or something. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But there's nothing that keeps them from doing that. There's nothing illegal about that. They can keep as much as they want. It definitely comes to you have to work with brokers that are fair and balanced, that are want to be even for everybody and not just take it all for themselves.
Is there any other advice that you can offer folks here in the time we have left, Tom?
If you come across a new broker, you haven't worked with them before, you can always give us a call in the compliance department. We can tell you what we know of them. We can discuss the contract and what you can do before you get in a bad situation. You would much rather deal with it beforehand than after the fact.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
I've been talking with Tom Crowley and Christopher Snyder of OOIDA's Business Services Department about broker problems that people are running into out there. And folks, if you have a question or a concern, call Business Services before you sign on that line. The number is 816-229-5791. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. We are into November, and that means it's time for a new issue of Landline Magazine. Managing editor Jamie Jones and senior editor Mark Schremer join me now. Thank you both for coming in.
Hey, you're welcome, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Jamie, I want to start with you and the editor's page. Something I know we hear a lot at OOIDA is when, we're trying to encourage people to become members. Oftentimes we're hit with the response that, well, I'm a company driver. I know you've had several conversations with people about this. Talk to me about that and why OOIDA is still very important for everyone.
Yeah, every editor's page, I try and come up with a theme, and as I was flipping through this issue, I realized how many active issues OOIDA is fighting on right now that immediately upon adoption would improve, the life of a company driver. And so I kind of went at my editor's page from a different direction. I called it Ed Page Company Drivers Edition, maybe playing off a little Taylor Swift thing. I don't know what I was doing. But anyway, because you have that conversation so many times. And I actually was on the phone with a member a couple days before I wrote this. And he's a longtime active member and, passionate about the association, had the conversation that even though he doesn't agree with 100% of the positions of the association, that there's no other group out there fighting for truckers the way OOIDA is. Mm-hmm. And he's got a couple of buddies who are company drivers. And they're just adamant that there's absolutely nothing OOIDA has to offer for company drivers. And it was, again, as I flipped through this issue, I was like, this is the playbook. This issue in particular, the November issue of Landline Magazine, hand this to them and dog-ear these pages. These are the things that will directly affect your life immediately if you don't get on board and help support or fight against the issue, depending on what it is. And so it was just, I thought it was a good opportunity because I know we're all steeped in OOIDA. We know the positions. We know the issues. I mean, day in, day out in the news arm, we're involved in this. The business services department's involved in this. But you get hit with that question sometimes at a truck show or something, and you're like, it kind of takes you back a little bit, even though you should be so prepared for it. And so that's why I was really excited about this issue, because I think it will arm so many of our owner-operator members who are trying to get their company driver friends to come on board. And there's some beefy issues that are really targeting company drivers in this issue.
And one of those autonomous vehicles, Mark, I know you covered this in your opinion piece and the cover story. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah. So there was a hearing in September looking at autonomous vehicles and specifically, the trying to move forward where some companies such as Aurora by the end of 2024 wants to actually have fully driverless trucks, going on routes in Texas. And so the hearing was kind of, discussing this, and lawmakers were bringing a lot of questions. And if you've read any mainstream media article, it will tell you about how this is the safety solution. This is the magic bullet that's just going to get us to where we have no fatalities out on the highway because computers are just going to, run this. But there were a lot of great safety questions that were asked during this hearing. There were a lot of questions about potential job displacement, at this hearing. And one of my favorite moments was Eleanor Holmes Norton, a delegate from D.C., asked I think the president of Aurora, can you, confirm right now that your technology, a driverless vehicle, will choose, the safety of a pedestrian, of a person, of human life over, equipment, cost of a vehicle or whatever else. And he dodged the question.
Surprisingly not.
He spoke for about 45 seconds and talked about how important safety was and all of that, but did not, answer that question. And if you listen along to this hearing, if you read this article, you'll see there's a lot of issues that were raised, whether it's coming to general safety or, like I said, we tie it back to, job displacement and drivers, and everything. ATA was also testified at this meeting, and they were trying to say, there's not going to be any job displacement because we have a driver shortage, so it's just going to fill that gap. It's not going to take any driver jobs away. But the only problem with that is there isn't a driver shortage, so it really kind of hurts that whole argument. But.
Well, and the whole optics about this hearing was terrible to begin with. I mean,
sure.
it was held during Truck Driver Appreciation Week, and here we are, and we're asking, we have lawmakers going at them specifically saying, are truck drivers going to lose their jobs? And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, the hemming and hawing to dodge that question was incredible. And so, there's so many arguments against autonomous technology right now. And, we have a lot of conversations about it around the newsroom. And AI, artificial intelligence, is a big conversation right now, just in everything. It's infiltrating every aspect of our lives. I mean, Hollywood's on strike over it, for crying out loud. And Schrimmer and I, being former sports journalists, hooked into this terrible, terrible AI-written article about a ball game. And so we were ranting about it, and I think you did a great opinion piece on that.
Thank you.
And now, Jamie, you, in this editor's page, a lot of different topics have been brought up, and I think it is a very good issue, probably one to maybe take to a truck show. I know we talked to a lot of people who say, like, well, OOIDA is not covering this issue enough. An example I had, speed limiters. OOIDA is not doing anything on speed limiters. And I remember, I don't even know if I had a good response, because I was kind of like, But we are.
Yeah.
And talk to me more about that. I mean, this is a topic that we are covering extensively, and OOIDA is doing a lot about.
Oh, 100%. I mean, speed limiters remains one of the top issues that we're going after right now. And the fact that we're getting congressional support with the DRIVE Act and everything else. I mean, Mark has been really covering this very closely, but the fact that we are getting the attention of lawmakers that a speed limiter mandate on all trucks would create a speed differential is a huge problem. And I won't let the cat out of the bag. Mark did some great reporting on this, but FMCSA tipped their hand a little bit, and OOIDA pounced this time.
Yeah. So in September, there was what the U.S. Department of Transportation puts out what they call a significant rulemakings report. And the day that report came out, if anybody's been following this whole speed limiter coverage, they put out a kind of an initial proposal, advance notice last year. But forever, all of this talk that they want to have speed limiters on commercial motor vehicles, but they've never put the top speed. And that's always been, the big question, everybody following this. Okay, some people, safety groups want 60, some want 65, some want 70. And in this notice, this significant rulemakings report, they put that it was going to be 68 miles an hour. And that gets everybody, going. Arguments for, arguments against, all of that. And then a few hours later, it was, I think I did an article. If anybody, a Saturday Night Live fan from the 70s, Gilda Radner, never mind. And they pulled it back and said, oh, no, we haven't decided the top speed yet. Did not really give a great explanation why. We don't know for sure if it was just a complete mistake. We don't know if it was just that they had skipped some procedural steps. And they are planning on 68, and we'll see that. We should get it's scheduled to get an actual proposal out before the end of the year in late December.
Well, and I think what's important when a mistake like this happens, and I'm using air quotes around mistake, we don't know the whole story about how that 68 made it to the light of day. But that was ammunition that OOIDA was used to capitalize on and go after more supporters for the DRIVE Act and get more lawmakers to sign on. Because if we can get Congress to step in and say the agency cannot, enforce a speed limit or mandate, that ends it right here, right now. And then that would take another congressional action to undo that one. Good luck. It's hard enough getting Congress to do one thing, to get them to undo it later is almost impossible. So that's why this is huge ammunition, and OOIDA pounced on it like crazy. So for company drivers, again, this, if you're speed limited, that reduces your miles, that reduces your pay, that increases the likelihood you're going to speed in areas probably where you shouldn't, because you're trying to make up that time, so all those different things. So speed limiters directly affects the finances and potential safety of company drivers.
Yeah, and Jamie and I recently, and I think it's also a little bit in this magazine edition as well, where we kind of did a deep dive into these big companies that support, speed limiters, and a lot of them have them. That does not mean that these companies are not speeding, because drivers, for the reasons you say, okay, maybe the speed limiting device is 65 miles an hour, maybe it's 68, and you're going through a 55-mile-an-hour zone, and you got that clock ticking on you, or maybe it's a construction and it's down to 45. That's the type of speeding that we're seeing a lot of, and it's
far more dangerous.
Yeah, and actually, these speed limiters can increase incentivize that type of behavior, because when it's 75 miles an hour, you're only able to go 68, you're losing time, and now we're in that 45 mile an hour zone. I better still go at least 60, and that type of thing. And that's when accidents happen.
And Jamie, you kind of touched on a few other things: driver pay, exemption from paying overtime, trying to get that removed. It really is, kind of OOIDA's motto of fighting for all the rights of all truckers.
It absolutely is. There's we haven't talked about it as much in recent months, but the pre-employment screening program, which is part of CSA, that's where drivers' violations are stored, and that can stop you from getting a job. Well, that process right now has law enforcement on the roadside basically set up to be judge, jury, and executioner on this. The appeals process, while it works for a few people, depending on the agency you're appealing to, doesn't work for everybody. So you could be blackballed over no fault of your own because they just put down a violation, maybe even wrote the wrong number. So we have that we're working on. Again, driver pay, that's a huge issue. Detention time, you're giving away this time for free at the docks. That no other profession has to do that. We do not sit here for 4 hours without pay and then get told we can go to work. I mean, that's just not how it works in office life. And so that time needs to be compensated. And then on top of that, over 40 hours a week. What's wrong with company drivers getting overtime pay? ATA sure as heck doesn't like it, but, OOIDA is fighting hard for it, and we're hoping to have some news on that front in the very near future.
All right, sounds good. Thank you both so much for coming in.
Hey, you're welcome, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you.
Our thanks to Jamie Jones and Mark Schremer of Landline Magazine. You can check out landline.media for all the latest from the trucking industry. And if you have a news tip for us, you can contact us through our website or call 816-229-5791. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. We'll be back after this.
since you started. What you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. There are a number of critical questions you need to answer in order to run a successful trucking business. Among the most important of those questions are, where's the freight going to be and how much is it going to pay? Today, Landline Now senior correspondent Ashley Blackford will bring us answers to both of those important questions with a look at this week's freight markets with the folks from DAT. Here's Ashley now with the report.
Thanks, Mark, and hello once again to Robert Rouse with DAT. How are you doing today, Robert?
I'm doing great, Ashley. Thanks for asking.
As we move into November, what spot market trends did DAT see that can help carriers over the next 2 months?
Yeah, based on the current numbers, one of the things we're seeing is we believe we're at the very bottom of a very soft freight market. Last week, we saw just over a 3.8% decrease in total load volumes, bringing loads down to just over 1.7 million loads. Spot market capacity is rapidly decreasing, and rising spot rates in some areas typically signal the market has turned. That may be pretty short-lived, though. The market will undoubtedly see a boost in demand heading into Thanksgiving and the Christmas shopping season. However, what follows is in the quiet season during the first quarter of next year is the most concern, particularly if it lasts longer past the second or even third quarters of next year. So we're still watching to see, but we believe we're towards the bottom of that. When we look at the number of trucks on the DAT load board, they decreased by around 6%, down to 388,000 trucks. As we end the month of October, interstate carriers are still exiting the industry, burdened by the 2019 level spot rates, which 2019 was a pretty lousy year for carriers, a soft freight market and already high fuel prices, and the fear of the Middle East crisis could expand regionally, driving crude oil and diesel prices even higher. The long-haul sector has been losing about around 10,000 carriers a month since July, but we're on track to lose the most number of carriers monthly since May in October. Based on DAT data, most of these carriers start out in the spot market, with 83% of those new entrants in the last year being DAT spot market customers. When we look at the overall strength of the spot market last week, we saw load-to-truck ratios remain pretty flat for vans, while both reefers and flatbeds actually saw increases. When we look at this week's reefer load-to-truck ratio, after remaining flat for the prior 2 weeks, last week's volume of reefer loads post decreased by 3% week over week, but they're down 41% year over year. Even though the Pacific Northwest fall produce regions, which equal about 15% of the total volume, are producing higher volumes this year, they're still 18% lower year over year volume in the largest California produce market, which is about 25% of the total load volume. And that's impacting the national truckload volumes. Compared to this time last year, when there was only about 2 of the 16 produce growing regions reporting a surplus of trucks, the USDA reported 9 regions having a surplus of trucks last week. And that, in comparison with carrier equipment posts, were down 7% week over week, and that resulted in last week's reefer loaded truck ratio increasing by about 4% to 2.90, but that's the lowest reefer loaded truck ratio in the last 7 years. Lastly, just touching on spot rates really quick, national benchmark broker-to-carrier spot rates without fuel decreased by 1 to 2 cents across all 3 equipment types last week. That said, after an increase in diesel prices last week, this week, the average national diesel price dropped around 9 cents per gallon, wiping out most of the jump from the week prior. That's good news, and hopefully see a full drop more to help carriers. But those fuel prices are definitely something that we have to watch for over the next couple of months.
As we get deeper into the fall season, what opportunities are there for flatbeds?
Yeah, fall and winter is definitely a slower season for flatbeds. That said, we typically see good flatbed volume in the southern states. Our economy doesn't run without oil. And as there's those geopolitical conflicts around the world, we may see more shifts in oil production around the world. Against the backdrop of the worsening Middle East crisis, global oil markets are being impacted, and they're driving up oil prices. Many energy firms remain focused on returning money to investors and paying down debt rather than boosting oil and gas production, just because the prices were so high. Going against the trend, energy firms actually added 2 oil and natural gas rigs for a second week in a row in early October, according to the Baker Hughes rig count. The oil and gas rig count is an early indicator of future output, and rose to 624 in the week of October 20. Despite the rig count increase, Baker Hughes said the total count was still down about 147, or 19% below this time last year. So still lower, but hopefully moving up. The oil and gas rig count in the Permian Basin in West Texas is especially important for the flatbed market. Drill pipe and casing demand is closely tied to freight volumes and spot rates. Around half of the national rig count comes from the Permian Basin in the Lubbock freight market, with Houston to Lubbock being one of the highest volume flatbed lanes nationwide. Consistent with the 19% lower rig count in October, spot rates from Houston to Lubbock lane have decreased by about 24% over the last 12 months. The volume of loads moving have also dropped by about 21% over the same time frame. The Baker Hughes rig count are an essential business barometer for the drilling industry and its suppliers. When drilling rigs are active, they consume products and services producing the service oil industry. The active rig count is a leading indicator of demand for products used in the drilling and completing, producing, and processing hydrocarbons. When carriers are looking at these type of loads on the load board, it's really important to understand if the load is for equipment or pipes. Those are going to be the majority of oil and gas loads that there will be out there. So understanding how to secure both of those are really important.
Now, diesel prices are usually owner-operators' largest expense. What tips do you have to help drivers save money on fuel?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, one of the largest costs is going to be the fuel an owner-operator has. Diesel prices at the pump fluctuate daily and from place to place and state to state. An effective owner-operator may spend as much as $70,000 annually on fuel. Therefore, it's cost-effective to join fuel reward programs at major retailers. An owner-operator should also implement following best practices to cut fuel costs: brake responsibly, a little bit lower speeds, stay in higher gear, minimize idling, and reducing RPMs. Another option is to find fuel programs that provide additional discounts. There's a bunch of great options out there, and there's still 30 or so % of carriers that don't have a fuel card. So that's definitely something that carriers should look at specifically around that. There's tons of them out there that can definitely help you save fuel. The other thing is it's really important to keep your truck well maintained. I know that's one of the things that a lot of carriers sometimes will put off, but as an owner-operator, your truck is your responsibility to maintain, and the truck payment, ongoing maintenance, insurance, all that stuff is super expensive. But if you take care of your truck and keep everything in order, keep it running safely, and keeps your not only your truck moving, but also keeps it active and keeps the miles per gallon down if the engine is running at top performance.
If our listeners want more information, where can they go for that?
Yeah, you can get the latest rate information at dat.com/trendlines, or look for the weekly market updates on the DAT blog. They're published every Wednesday.
All right, Robert, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashley.
That was Robert Rouse with DAT. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Ashley. Our program is produced by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, the only national organization representing the interest of professional truck drivers in Washington, D.C., in state legislatures, and with the regulatory agencies that deal with transportation and highway safety. If you're not a member yet, call our main number during business hours to join today. That number is 816-229-5791. You can join right now for 2 years for $50, a $40 discount. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
My kids.
chrome,
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.